Welcome to Rusty Water Towers, the podcast in search of faith and hope in rural life and ministry. I'm your host, Dr. Jonathan Lemaster Smith, or as folks often call me, Dr. J. Each episode of this podcast, I talk with the guest about their experience in rural life and ministry as we search for stories, examples, and images of creative faith and hope that I believe are latent in our rural communities. Our guest today is the Reverend David Christy, the District Superintendent of the Catawba Valley District in the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church, and we'll get to know him in just a minute. But first, as we always do, we'll start this week off with a country music recommendation for me about rural life. This week, I just can't get enough of Miranda Lambert's Waxahachie. This song is about finding hope in a town that's an all-night drive from Louisiana. The singer opens the song in anger as she says, "I wrote a lipstick letter on a mirror with a bourbon buzz." And as she sings this, it could end up being a song of heartbreak, loss, and pain, but it seemed to shift. Waxahachie, are you still on 35? Are you still an all-night drive from Louisiana? Waxahachie, I can be there by 4 a.m., looking for a long-lost friend. That's what you've always been. Waxahachie. Oh, Waxahachie. Now, she could be driving to an old lover, her mama, or it could be the town that gave her life, taught her how to live, and gives her hope for something beyond the pain and anger she feels from New Orleans. Sometimes we need to get back to the places, towns, and people that ground us, the places that let us know we are more than our grief and anger and feelings of failure and inferiority. As you listen to this song, think about your Waxahachie, the place that makes it worth an all-night drive, the place where you can go rest and renew, find hope and strength to keep going, and maybe find the people you know you love. Just like always, I'll add this to our Rusty Water Towers playlist on Spotify. All right, now let's get to know our guest. Welcome, David. What did you think about this song?
I first of all, I appreciate being on with you, and I love the song because I do think it gets to your theme of rural places that ground us.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's exactly what it means in real life, in real kind of rural places, and that's at its best what the church can be in those places, for sure. So yeah, I'm digging it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So now I'm going to ask you to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what you do. They know you're a district superintendent, but you're also first a pastor in the United Methodist Church. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I am a United Methodist pastor. I'm in my 33rd year of ministry. I have served in rural places and town and city, and which is the gift, I think, of our connection in all of those places. I am married to Pam, who is an elementary school teacher. We have 2 children. Our son is a pastor of a 2-point charge in Anson County, married, and they have a new 1-year-old. She just turned 1 a few weeks ago. Our granddaughter, Addie, Luke and Kelly have Addie, and our daughter is Maggie, who is a teacher assistant at Clyde Elementary School in Haywood County. And I guess the weird thing about my family, and there are lots of weird things, is we are all in ministry in one way or another. My father was a minister, and my brothers are in ministry. My sister's in ministry. My brother-in-law is. My cousin had an uncle. So it's weird, but we all came about it our own way, and it's really a wonderful life, we believe.
Great. So we're going to take a little break, and then we're going to come back and talk about maybe some stories or experiences you have in rural ministry. So we'll be back after this. Hi there, Jonathan here, and if you're listening to this, you probably know that I like country music quite a bit. In fact, this coming Sunday, I'm using Miranda Lambert's The House That Built Me to talk about searching for the things we've lost in my sermon. That's why I'm teaching a class in country music. This course is being offered through beadisciple.com and is named Country Music and Christian Faith. It's a 3-week course that explores the connections between music, faith, and community without leaving behind the edgier parts of country music. Much of the course consists of listening to and reflecting on music that reflects the history and diversity of the country music genre. It creates a space for shaping spiritual practices and offers meaningful playlists. There will be optional gathering times, and they'll be there for listening, reflecting, and sharing part of our lives together. There will be a resource library with a mix of articles, videos, and podcasts on the history, theology, and spirituality of country music, from Alan Jackson to Zach Brown. This course begins on October 17th, 2022, is only $50, and is hosted by beadisciple.com. Check out beadisciple.com for more information. Thanks. Welcome back, everyone. David, thanks so much for spending time with us on the podcast. I want you to share a story with us, an experience, something in your life about rural ministry that you think gives us hope and faith for the future of rural ministry.
Yeah, I think a couple of things come to mind, and they center around the idea of real, not pretend, but real. The first is since I'm a preacher's kid, where my father grew up and my grandfather lived in Andrews, North Carolina, out on the tip of the state in the mountains near Murphy. That was the one place that was a constant home for us. And even when I became an adult and my grandfather was dead, my dad's aunt lived to be 112. Oh, wow. And lived in the home place until she was about 107. So my father and I used to meet there, and the family used to meet there. Dad kept a garden at the home place and would go over and check on Aunt Jean and keep the garden. And I would drive up to visit Aunt Jean and see them. One day back, you may remember Eric Robert Rudolph, who was sort of infamous in the mountains for the Atlanta bombing of an abortion clinic. He was hiding, they knew, somewhere up in the mountains. Yeah. And the federal agents had a headquarters in Andrews. So it was during that time. And I went up to see them and I said, Dad, I got to get a haircut. And he said, well, I'll go with you. We'll go down. There's one barber shop in Andrews. Yeah. He said, we'll go down to the barber shop. And I went down before him. And when I walked in, it was just a bunch of old men sitting in this barber shop. Everybody got quiet. And I just sat down to wait my turn. And a little while, and it was weird because nobody was talking. Little while later, my dad, at 75 years old, walked in, and the barber said, well, hey, Johnny, how are you? Now, my father had not lived there since he left to go to college at 18 years old. Oh, he's 75, but Andrews doesn't change much. He knew everybody in there. He said, this is my son, David. And the barber, I'll never forget it, he said, that's your boy? I thought he was one of them feds in here, and we weren't going to talk to them because while they did not agree with what Eric Robert Rudolph did, they more so didn't like outsiders coming in to try to tell them they felt what they needed to do. Because my last name was Christy in that little town, I was welcome. And that reminds me of the way I think church is. Yeah. We are welcome in church in many cases, in rural places and in big places because of our family, but more so because of the God who goes before us. And in my first appointment, I served a 2-point charge in rural Randolph County. And I had big dreams about how I needed to change the church and do everything. And Interestingly enough, I was getting nowhere with that.
Shocking.
I know it's hard to believe, isn't it?
Yeah.
I knew everything. I had a seminary education.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll never forget a farmer named Bill. He was a chicken farmer and cattle farmer, and and tobacco farmer. In those days, you could still raise tobacco.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, "Young preacher, why don't you come to the store?" The store, as he called it, was just a building on his farm where he sold seed. Mm-hmm. And the farmers in that community all gathered there on Tuesday morning. Well, it took a little while because I'm sort of dumb, but I realized I need to be sitting there drinking a Grape Nehi every Tuesday morning to find out in that little community what goes on. Sure enough, after about a month of doing that, suddenly we started having conversation. And I was actually invited to the administrative board meeting. I was the appointed pastor, but they would have the administrative board when I drove to the other church on Sunday morning. So it took going in there and being accepted by Bill and the farmers and just shutting up and listening that I finally sort of became their pastor and was able to be a part, again, not because of who I was, but because they allowed me to be that person. It reminds me, I saw something on Twitter the other week Tim Keller put out that said, in large churches, people let you pastor because of your preaching. In small membership churches, people let you preach because of your pastoring generally. And I thought, dude, you are all over it. I think that's so true. My father, the only advice he ever gave me was a little bit of visiting makes up for a whole lot of bad preaching.
Yes.
Sadly, he said that after he heard me preach. But I think there is truth to that. Not that I think preaching is vitally important, but if we don't know each other, if we don't recognize the God in each other and that gift in each other, I think we're missing it. And I think that is the gift of rural places, that we can be real. It isn't about the degrees or the seminary or the whatever. It's just about, hey, did you go by the feed store? Did you meet Ray? Did you meet Bill? Did you meet Fred? Did you just sit and talk? There's a lot to that that's really, really important. So yeah, I think that for me, that is the real gift of ministry in rural places. It's just real. It's the way I think God intends us to be. I think that's the way Jesus did his ministry, in walking around, telling stories, meeting people where they were. And I think we can learn a lot from that. I know I can.
And telling those kind of stories, yesterday I was visiting at my two small churches, and the two people's houses I showed up at first were not home. But the third person I went to, I was at his house for 2 hours because he's a Christmas tree farmer. So he had me on his golf cart driving all around his Christmas tree and telling him about this. He's been working with Christmas trees for 70 years. And
isn't that awesome?
It is awesome. And just going to his house and talking to him about that was wonderful. And that's my hope whenever I do get to visit people, is to, connect with them and find out from them. And because I'm that person from the outside, I have thankfully credentialed myself a little bit. My dad was born in this area, so that helped.
Exactly.
And one of the pastors who was at one of these churches baptized me in the 1980s. So
wow.
Yes. So they're like, oh, well, you have multiple connections to the community. You're one of us. One lady has claimed that since I'm a Smith, I'm kin to her. So no matter what. So there's that. Anything else you want to share about rural ministry experiences?
Just, I don't think anything in particular. I think that just again to appreciate the moment. that folks are in. There are many days that I think back to those relationships, and so often that's what it is. It's not the stuff that we do; it's the relationships that we make, and the way again, as a United Methodist minister, we've moved around with my family and my kids. The baptismal vows that we say, hey, we're going to help each other raise these kids. Mm-hmm. My children will tell you they learned much more from the saints in the churches through the years than they certainly did from me. Now, their mama's another story. She's really smart and gifted, but it's a blessing to me to see the honor with which our children hold the people in the churches that we served, and the way that the kids want them involved in their life events. When our son was getting married, my goodness, the guest list on our side was people from every church we had served.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And that's a real gift. Mm-hmm. And our daughter is living back in a community that I served in when she was in high school, and to have that sense of home there is just an amazing gift that really, I believe, only comes authentically through the church. Mm-hmm. And that is, goodness knows, we got lots of issues in the church, and I'm one of the issues in the church. I get it. But what a gift it is, especially in rural places.
Oh, yes. I think the church is so often still, as Alan Stanton will call it, an anchor institution.
That's right.
And they are the places that, I've talked with, I teach rural ministry, and one of my students did some research, and she interviewed multiple people in her community, and even people who did not go to church said that if that church disappeared, it would be a loss to the community.
Absolutely.
The church is, because rural places are so ingrained in place, and it's not just about the people, the building itself, they know who goes in and out of that building. They know what that building stands for. And those relationships, then beyond that, there's that membrane that people move in and out of. That there are people who say that's their church, even though they've never been to it because of something that happened.
That's right.
So that's what I think one of the hopes we get, that our rural churches are serving their communities, even just by being present. And they can just keep growing and reaching out and connecting more in new ways. I think that's some of the most important things they could do, is just be present. Like you said, be present with your church people, and they'll invite you to be their pastor. It's that's right. That sort of thing. So as we finish up today, I ask all my guests to bring something like a piece of media, a book or a movie, a song, something that has touched you that gives you hope in rural communities.
Yeah, I thought of a couple of songs, actually. I over the past several years have become a big bluegrass fan, and Mylan Miller has a new song, "Trout Don't Live in Ugly Places." Uh-huh. That is, I'm no good at trout fishing, but I grew up in the mountains mostly, so I love to go in mountain streams and trout fish. But he talks about that, and then another is an old 1970s, I guess, song by Mac Davis called "Uncle Booger Red and Birdie Nail," and he talks about, it makes me think of being at Granddad's on the front porch after supper. In those days, I think my granddad had a TV, but I really don't remember. I know he had a radio. But after supper, what you did was go out and sit on the front porch, and Granddad would tell stories. And I'm the youngest of the kids in my family, and my sister and my two brothers all play the guitar and sing and are nice. I don't do any of those. But I can remember them singing "Uncle Booger Red and Birdie Nail," and it talks about, come Sunday, we least gonna see Uncle Booger Red and Birdie Nail. They got finger-licking chicken in a pile that's on the floor. All the youngins giggling, wiggling, make your back sore. Climb in, there's room for one more at Uncle Booger Red and Birdie Nail. And that image of going to that place. Again, I don't have a town but I have a place, Granddad's front porch, that was important to me growing up. That was a consistent place. And I listen to that song a lot now that you can get things on YouTube, and all those young people click on things that you smart people do. And it reminds me of, in the midst of a crazy life, because he's talking about a farmer who doesn't have enough money, but at least Sunday they're going to be fed and to be with family. And I think about that sort of in the image of the church. You know, we get one chance when we meet together on Sunday. And I think about that every Sunday before I preach. There may be somebody coming into this community that day who's really struggling. And they say, God, I'm going to give you one more chance. And that's really important stuff that we do when we proclaim the good news. And I that's my prayer. God, help me to be attentive to that one.
Yes.
That may just need to hear what your word says today. So don't let me take that for granted, and let me do it with joy. So anyway, I went down a rabbit hole
that
there,
is
but
fine.
those are my songs, Mac Davis and Mylan Miller.
That sounds fabulous. I'll add those to our playlist as well. I'm sure they're available on Spotify if you can find them on the internet.
Spotify if I can find them, they have to be.
Spotify has almost everything, so that's good. And that's what I want. I want this podcast to be about sharing stories. So many of the podcasts I found are like, here are statistics about growth and decline in communities. I mean, I want to hear the stories that keep communities going. Yeah. So that's why we're here.
Sure. Thank you for doing that, too.
Yes. Well, as we close out today, can our listeners find you anywhere on social media?
I'm sure they can, Dr. J, but, I'm on Facebook.
Okay.
I don't know what that means. I am on that Twitter thing, but I don't know what my handle that you young people call is. And I'm on Instagram, but I never use it. So I don't know. I just click on my phone to get to them, but I'm on them.
Okay. If I can figure out how to put them in the show notes, I'll put them there. Otherwise, I'll just tell them to Google around and find you. I'll send them
there you go.
I'll send them to the conference page for you.
There you go. That sounds good.
All right. Well, again, thanks so much for being on here, and I'm going to close out the show now. You can listen to Rusty Water Towers wherever you get podcasts. If you have questions, suggestions for guest topics, or just want to say hi, reach out to us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, or you can email us at rustywatertowers@gmail.com. Special thanks to Shannon LeMaster-Smith for our theme music. I record and produce this podcast because of my hope that it lifts up the hope and faith of rural life. I record using Zoom Pro, edit and audition, and design our graphics on Canva and Photoshop, and distribute it via Anchor.fm. We hope you'll catch us for the next episode, and have a wonderful day.
That's so cool.
I live across the railroad tracks in a little lighthouse that you pass if you weren't trying to find me. Many of the trees are dead, there's stumps in the ground in a great big yard across from the fire station. Oh,